Again, I'm Allison Malman. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Active Minds, and with me is Sonia Weisbird, who is our Regional Chapter Manager, who is in charge of the chapters in the western region of the United States, and so is the one who works very closely with our current California chapters, and will be the one who works with you when you work to develop a chapter on your campus if you haven't already been in connection with her. But we're thrilled to be here and be able to share this information with you. If I move over to the second slide, about Active Minds, I think one of the things that we have found to be pretty helpful in talking about who we are as an organization is actually to talk about the history of the organization, because it really helps frame both our mission as well as how we accomplish what we accomplish and why we do it. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the history of the organization. When I was a freshman in college, I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I lost my big brother to suicide. Brian is my only sibling, and he was 4 years and 4 days older than me. The story behind his illness and his eventual death was that he was a star high school student who got into his top choice university and went to school in New York City and started experiencing what we learned was some pretty severe mental health issues in his freshman year, in February of his freshman year. We never really understood the true depth of his experiences, but we've learned that he dealt with very severe depression and also psychosis. He actually was hearing voices, and at the same time managed to earn 3.8 GPA, become president of different on-campus groups, become president of an a cappella group. He was a sports writer for the school newspaper, eventually became a sports editor of the paper, was just kind of a star student all around, but was really, really suffering and struggling on the inside. And there were times that we knew that I remember my mom talking him through, he had missed classes for a full week, but he told us it was because he was dealing with mono, and it turns out that he was in such a severe depression he couldn't get out of bed. And it wasn't until his senior year that he told anybody about it and that he sought help for it. And as I said, he maintained this exterior of just doing a phenomenal job and just being that ideal college student that everybody wants and every parent wants for their kid, but was suffering inside. He finally did go to his school's counseling services in his senior year, and at that point they recommended that he come home for a weekend to relax, because even they didn't understand the depth of what he was going through. And he did, but ultimately took a leave of absence from school to start in pretty intensive treatment at home. I grew up outside of the D.C. area, and so he came home, he took this voluntary leave of absence, started treatment, different regimens of treatment, but really what had happened was that he had, we were able to control a lot of the psychosis and a lot of the typical symptoms of his disorder, but what we weren't able to control was that hopelessness that he felt and the hopelessness that he had really spiraled down into over the previous 3 years that he had been on campus, struggling and suffering alone. What I learned after the fact was that, he kept it quiet because he thought it was his fault. He thought that he was the only one because, after all, college is the best time of your life. And so when you're a student who doesn't necessarily feel that way, you think that it's just you that's suffering. And so he thought it was his responsibility to make himself feel better. He couldn't understand why he wasn't, and it clearly is something wrong with him. And so that's why he hid it from us. We did learn after the fact, too, though, that his friends had noticed some changes in him. They had noticed him acting differently at different rehearsals and behaving, just a little bit off sometimes, but they had never really been educated about what any of it meant. Brian was keeping it quiet, and so they thought the best thing to do to support him was to kind of keep it quiet too and to respect him. So nobody ever said anything to him about it. As I said, he did take a leave of absence, but ended up taking his own life about a little over a year after taking that leave. It was my freshman year of college when he died by suicide, and it was only really at that point that I came to understand and learn more about both what had gone on with his life and really more than anything what had happened to him and with him as a student. And it was at that point that I really dove into research, and I learned just the prevalence of these issues, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later on in the presentation, but just how prevalent these issues are, the fact that as an 18-year-old, Brian first started experiencing severe mental health issues. It's actually, pretty typical. And knowing that had he heard the messages that there were other students who had struggled, and that there was hope, and there's potential, and that their recovery is possible. All of those messages that anybody who feels alone and anybody who is suffering with their mental health needs to hear, he had never heard them. And I was kind of astounded because I hadn't heard them either, and nobody was talking about it on my campus. Nobody had told us about this in high school, and recognizing if these issues are so prevalent, and if it ultimately took Brian's life, how many other students on my campus were struggling too, and campuses around the country. And so I launched a student group in my junior year, with the basic mission to promote mental health education and to encourage students to share their stories, to speak openly about mental health, to get this information and this education that I had learned myself through research, and really to work closely with the on-campus services, whatever they may be. So in my university, it was counseling and psychological services, or CAPS. Different universities obviously have different resources available to students, but the idea of the student group was to become the outreach arm of those services, so that the folks who are working in the services can really focus on treatment and giving treatment modalities and services to students, and the student group, Active Minds, can really work on helping students understand that it's okay to seek help, know where to seek help, and really feel comfortable getting it as early as possible. I feel very strongly that had we been able to get this message to Brian earlier, and had he been able to get support earlier, his life trajectory may have been different, and it was really just those years that he suffered alone, that he wasn't getting help and he wasn't getting support from our family or his friends, that really ultimately took his life. And so that's where Active Minds was born, as I was an undergrad, and then I got immediate, incredible support from my university, which was astounding, both from up to the president's office down to hundreds of students on campus. And so when I graduated in 2003, I formed the nonprofit in order to develop and support other chapters of that group on other campuses, recognizing that this is much more than my story and than Brian's story, and that, in fact, with these numbers as they are, so many students are struggling and feel alone and need to hear this information, and also really have experiences that they want to share and really want to throw themselves into this cause that they've never really been able to be an advocate for and be a part of. So now we are almost 10 years old, and we have grown to a national headquarters in Washington, D.C., a national office in D.C. with 14 full-time staff and more than 370 chapters on college, university, and high school campuses across the country. As you see in the slide, 34 of those 370 are actually in California. We have an incredible contingency of chapters in the state of California, and 9 of those California chapters are at community colleges. Interestingly, 34, so nearly 10% of our chapters overall are at community colleges to begin with. So we have a great mixture of chapter representation, ranging from community colleges to four-year institutions to a couple dozen in high schools as well. If we go on to the next slide, as I said, the basic mission of Active Minds is essentially what the mission was when I started the first student group. And what we work to do is to empower students to speak openly about mental health in order to educate others and encourage help seeking. We're doing that by changing the culture on campuses and in the community, by providing information, leadership opportunities, and advocacy training to the next generation. One of the things that we have really learned through the work at Active Minds is not only are we creating opportunities for students to get involved in campus and to help promote awareness of these issues on campus and really help the on-campus services, but we're also creating a new generation of leaders, both in the field and not, who are more educated about mental health and are addressing mental health differently. So quite a few Active Mind students who graduate from their respective schools go on and either stay in psychology or go to medical school even and become psychiatrists, go into social work school. Others don't. Others don't necessarily stay in the mental health field, but they're armed with this knowledge about mental health and this understanding that these issues are real and they affect a lot of people, and they speak differently about them, and they respect people with the issues, and they break down the stigma that so enshrouds mental health issues and suicide particularly. So, and as these people get out of school and continue to work in their communities and raise their families, we are raising a new generation of young people who are going to be born into a society that understands these issues more. So we're really creating a new generation who is willing to talk about mental health in a way that I haven't necessarily seen in my parents' or grandparents' generations. So the next slide, a little bit about those statistics that I learned, and that I think is just so important. And for many of you on this call, you're going to know this already, but I will remind everybody just how prevalent this issue is and how important it is to focus on students. I think one of the things that makes Active Minds so unique is our efforts to do for peer-to-peer awareness, having a student group on campus working to promote awareness amongst students and promote awareness about the resources for seeking help. And that's primarily for a couple of reasons. One, student-to-student interaction, peer-to-peer interaction is the best way to really connect with somebody on mental health. Research shows that in order to break stigma, the best way to break and reduce stigma is to have an interaction with a peer who has been impacted by these issues. Another statistic that we have found is that 67% of students who have suicidal thoughts tell a friend before they tell anybody else. And so we can do, we can do a lot of training of different individuals on campus and different professionals and staff, et cetera. At the end of the day, 2/3 of students who are in crisis are talking to a friend before they're talking to any of those professionals and any of that staff. And so it's just so crucial that when we talk about student mental health, we cannot ignore the students who are on our campuses who are our main line of defense. And so Active Minds really works to empower and engage those students to be educated, not to be therapists and not to give support, but to know, hey, I'm really worried about you. Can I help you? Can I walk you over to the counseling center? Can I call them for you? Can I call the hotline for you? Just to be a friend and get somebody into the professional support that he or she needs. The next stat, an estimated 26% of Americans lives with a mental health disorder in any given year, 1 in 4. That's a statistic that we actually use quite often at Active Minds to help people recognize that this really is something that impacts all of us and really does impact everybody's family. 1 in 4, and we'll often talk about, look in your classroom and look around you, and of, 3 people sitting around you, 1 of you likely is struggling with mental health disorder. This isn't rare, and if you are suffering, it's not just you. You're not alone. There are other people who have been through this and continue to be through this. What's just so important is, and we talk about a lot at Active Minds, is that there's just no dialogue around mental health issues at all. There's so much silence because of the stigma, and so people who struggle just think that they're the only ones. And so helping everybody recognize just how prevalent these issues are, even if we don't talk about them, they're so prevalent, they're out there, and so we need to talk about them so that everybody can get the support and the resources that they need. Another recent statistic was that almost 1/3 of college students report having felt so depressed in the past year that they had trouble functioning. Again, this is not necessarily clinical depression, but 33% of students walking around campuses these days are having trouble functioning because they feel that depressed. And so students recognize that this is a real issue, and they recognize that they are struggling, and they recognize that their friends are struggling, and they're just desperate to get more information, to learn more, to understand more, and just hungry for this type of programming and the information that we do around mental health on campus. Moving over to the next slide. We know that mental health issues in the college student population, including depression, anxiety, eating disorders, are associated with lower GPA and a higher probability of dropping out of college. And this is a statistic that comes out of Daniel Eisenberg at the University of Michigan and his Healthy Minds study. And we understand and we know that mental health issues not only impact the student on campus, but often impact retention rates and the probability of success at school. And so when we look at just the sheer numbers and recognizing that we want retention on our campuses and at our schools, we need to continue to do all we can to support a student's mental health, because it's not just what they're learning in the classroom that's impacting their probability of graduating. And finally on this slide, institutions of higher learning, including community colleges, provide a captive audience for our public health approach to mental health awareness and education. This is just so important, and one of the things that we talk about quite often is that Active Minds is focused on mental health, but we take a public health approach to it, recognizing that mental health is not just something that should sit within counseling services, not just something that should sit within a resource, a certain resource section. This is an issue that everybody needs to be a part of. This is a public health issue that needs to take a public health approach so that we can ensure the well-being of all students. Even long before we talk about suicide, starting from that student who just starts losing interest in things that were once interesting to them, just can't get themselves out of bed, doesn't know what's going on, and thinks it's their own fault. Moving over to the next slide. So Active Minds' goals, as it relates both to our mission statement and these statistics, are pretty comprehensive. One is to increase students' awareness of mental health issues. The sheer understanding of what mental health issues are, understanding of what it means to have depression or bipolar disorder, or how multiple personality disorder is not schizophrenia, and how anxiety is a major issue for students, as well as eating disorders, post-traumatic stress. Some of the major players in mental health, especially as they relate to college students, and just increase their awareness of what these issues are, what the symptoms and signs of different issues are, and what it means, and what the where there are resources available for seeking help. The next is to promote a dialogue around mental health, and as I spoke to in the beginning, our tagline at Active Minds is changing the conversation about mental health. And what that means to us is, first of all, starting a conversation about mental health, and ensuring that people have the opportunity to hear, to voice their experiences and to hear from others what their experiences are, and then to make sure that that dialogue is open, it's enlightened, it's educated, so that people are not just throwing around stigmatizing language because they haven't been educated. I can't tell you how often we hear people say, "Oh, I'm so depressed I didn't get a pink starburst," or "She's so crazy." And in some ways, that's glib and that's fun, but in many ways that contributes to the stigma around the issues. So we promote a dialogue around mental health, and promote one that is enlightened and educated. The next is, as I said, to remove the stigma that surrounds mental health disorders, to help people understand that many of us suffer and struggle from mental health disorders, and that we're normal people too, and we're dealing and we're struggling. But so often what we see in the public eye or in the media is a link between mental illness and violence, or mental illness and a person that we don't want to be, and really recognizing that people all around us are suffering and are struggling, and they need our support, and at the same time they're no different than any of the rest of us, and we all just need to be there to support each other. Another goal is to create learning communities where students feel encouraged to speak up about mental health, creating an entire environment where students are not afraid to just talk openly about these issues, because we know that when students talk openly about these issues, they feel more comfortable sharing their experiences and ultimately getting the support that they need. And that's our main goal, is to create this environment where these issues are widely discussed, so that people who are struggling, like my brother Brian, don't wait 3.5 years to go get help because they're ashamed. They realize that these are real issues, and this is an age of onset, that it could happen, and that there's hope, and that there's help, and here's where you can go to get help for what you're going through, which takes us to the next bullet, which is to increase help-seeking behaviors. Ultimately, what our goal is to get students who need help into help. We don't promote any one particular type of help, and really recognize that support and help looks different for every student, and want to encourage students to get whatever support and help that they need. Our chapters, as I said, work very closely with their on-campus services, and so promote the services on campus, and also we recognize as a national organization, and the chapters do as well, that there's sometimes services and resources off campus. And so we'll work to promote the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, some online crisis chats, what the students think makes the most sense, as well as what the school is currently promoting for resources for students to be seeking help. And then finally, our goal, is to create a national movement for college student mental health. One of the things that has transpired over the past almost 10 years of Active Minds' existence is that we have become the young adult voice in mental health. We have become the voice in student mental health. We are the leading organization that organizes students around mental health promotion and mental health education on campuses. And so because of that, we are continuing to work to amplify our national voice and take what our to harness all of the energy and the activity that's happening on a campus level and connect those chapters with each other, and then connect all of them with a national movement. We have a national conference that happens each year, which Sonia will talk a little bit more about, but really recognizing that the power of our national organization lies within the ability of our chapters to make impact on campus, and the power of chapters on campus lies in the ability for us as a national organization to harness that activity and to build on it and to promote it. So this is a nice cycle of work that we do here, and really at our national office. Our 14 staff, 10 are devoted exclusively to our programming in our chapters, really working to support what's happening on campus and what our national programming is doing to help support the chapters and help support our mission on a national scale and a larger scale. I am now actually going to turn it over to Sonia to talk about our approach and to move forward into more specifically about how Active Minds works, what it looks like on campus, and then move into questions from there. So Sonia, you want to take over?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia, and I think I might have been in touch with a few of you. I certainly just received paperwork from at least one of your schools, so I actually wanted to update the earlier slide that we will now have 36 chapters in the state of California, which puts California as the state with the largest number of chapters officially in the country. So congratulations. You are all in a great place to be doing mental health awareness on college campuses. The state of Pennsylvania used to have the most number of chapters as our founding state, but with 36, we've just surpassed that just today, actually. I got 2 chapter registration packets, so I thought that was pretty cool and pretty exciting. So just to continue on from Allison, and we've basically touched on this, but as a social worker, I like to talk about models and a little bit of the approach. And so certainly public health approach, focusing on prevention. So just looking at education as prevention. There's certainly more direct service-based prevention, such as offering depression screenings, such as, or actually a number of different types of screenings, and having, walk-ins and open houses for counseling centers and things like that. But what we hope that our students do is actually bring their friends to those depression screenings, to those open houses for counseling centers, and really help the direct service folks at colleges and universities get to the people that need their services the most. And so that's basically where the prevention model comes in. Certainly peer-to-peer. And with peer-to-peer, it's important not only for the age group, so for traditional students, so that your 18 to 24-year-old population, for example, certainly well known that they'll turn to their peers for any and all information first. And so that 2/3 of college students statistic is actually really important to me, because I know that that's who they're really listening to. And when we are fighting a whole bunch of information and noise sort of online, which is where our students all are, it's good to know that when they're actually turning to real human beings, they're turning to their friends for information most of the time and for support. And so that's why we are on college campuses, and that is why I believe anyway that our work is successful. And then the last piece is just the social change aspect. And so it's not just how many people can we get to seek help, but it's also certainly changing society for the better, and changing society sort of in the way that I think cancer awareness, prevention, and treatment has been successful. And I think the movement to normalize cancer as a disease is something that you can have, and you're still allowed to, or even the HIV, I think AIDS epidemic, and the way that information needed to be spread that you can hug a person with HIV and you're going to be okay. It's the same type of education that we need to push with mental health, and I think we're getting actually pretty close. And I think that with media awareness, not all of it is great, but at least it's putting it out and it's putting it in front of people. And so if our students can read an article about a shooting in a more educated way, and then if they're going to be talking to their friends about it, if they can talk to that article in a different way than people would 10 years ago, then we are certainly moving society in a better direction. And so certainly social change models are important to us because we don't want to just be putting Band-Aids on people who are hurting. We really want to be creating a more open dialogue so that people don't have to, suicide doesn't have to ever come into the picture as an option or a solution. So a little bit about our approach. A little bit about why students get involved in mental health advocacy, because some people do wonder why our students spend as much time and energy as they do on focusing on their chapters. Two of the most important reasons are a personal connection to the issue, which actually includes themselves or friends or family. And so a number of our top student leaders are students who struggle with and overcome mental health disorders or who live with a mental health disorder of one sort or another, or they have family or friends who either have struggled or are currently struggling. And so it's something really near and dear to their hearts, which means that they're extremely passionate about this issue. It creates a completely different set of advocates. I've worked with young people, in other causes before Active Minds, and it's just different when you're talking about, childhood hunger or an issue where it's a little bit removed. People, really care about hungry children, certainly, especially college students, but it's different when it's so personal. And there's a lot more at stake with the issue when it's personal, and so those are some of our staunchest advocates, certainly all over the country, are folks who either know what it's like to struggle or who see their friends and family. And especially if their friends or family or themselves, especially if they've found treatment that works, they're that much more passionate and excited about passing it on and sort of getting messaging out there that, hey, this got better, and I got better, and now I'm doing all these things, or even, I survived a suicide attempt, and I'm so happy to be here today, and I want to tell everyone else who's struggling that it gets better. I love the It Gets Better campaign that's out there, and we certainly are organizational supporters of theirs because that's a key message for us too. The other sort of larger contingent is our folks who are interested in the career aspect of mental health. So we have anyone from even the sociology field all the way to certainly psychology, psychiatry, but social work students, mental health, like mental health educators, folks, just a variety of different majors and departments to whom this work is really interesting. Students who are really interested in this work professionally, and so those folks come in. Some folks get interested just because they're sort of looking, it's freshman year, and they come in and they're looking for something to do, and they know they should put something on their resume. They know they should get involved. That's what, their parents are telling them or their friends are telling them or whatever, and they happen to stumble upon Active Minds. Because our students tend to be folks with elevated sort of empathy and awareness about each other, about other people, just because of the issue, because of the content. A lot of times our chapters are very, very welcoming places, and so folks who sort of stumble upon the student group just love the people and just want to join because they like hanging out. They might not have any special connection to mental health or mental health, education or advocacy work even, but they walk into a meeting or they get brought, they get dragged, whatever it might be, and then just love the group that they find. And so those are those folks. And then certainly, and these are the people that are sort of at the opposite end are folks that get brought in because they've been given access to information or access to resources. And so they might be someone who picks up a flyer and walks into a counseling center, gets some treatment, and then their counselor might say, hey, there's this great group on campus, or hey, how did you hear about us? And the student might say, well, I picked up this brochure that there's a counseling center on campus, and it was from an Active Minds table. And so then that person starts wondering about the issue and might get involved because they are actually the recipients of information that we hope to be dispersing through our students. So those are all reasons why students get involved. There's certainly a few others, but these are the main ones. And so our model, as you may already know or you heard during this presentation, are student chapters. Student chapters are student organizations. They have to be registered and officially affiliated with your college, which means they are under the purview and all rules and regulations of your college. And that is certainly on purpose because along with being able to then access all the sort of rules and regulations that your college provides as structure, they're also then able to seek out all the resources that your college has. So if there is funding through the student life or student activities as a student group, they would be eligible for that funding. If there is, when you go to book space on campus, when you want to bring in vendors, when you want to do any official business on a college campus, you certainly want to be directly affiliated so that you can go through all the proper channels to do all those things and be a successful student organization. So first and foremost, that's our first step, or our first request is when you go to start a chapter, you're going to want to register it as a student organization. That process looks really different on each college and university, and so we ask you to do whatever it is that your college or university requests to become a student organization. Sometimes that takes a little bit longer, and for some folks it literally takes maybe a week to just fill out some paperwork. It just really depends. We make our process here, all of our processes, as flexible as possible because we work with such a diversity of campuses and colleges. And so, anything from technical schools to teeny tiny liberal arts colleges to large Big Ten schools to community colleges and commuter schools. So because each campus looks so different, we try hard to be as flexible as possible to allow all the different regulations and rules that schools have. So chapters are a liaison, but certainly between the student body and then college administrators and mental health providers. So this mental health providers, being a liaison to mental health providers also looks different at every college and university. And I particularly want to note that I know well that some community colleges don't have mental health services on campus, and they just don't have access to that, and that you either have some sort of triage personnel, or you simply get referred into the community. And so it's that much more important, I think, for there to be an Active Minds chapter for peers to smooth that process, because it's actually difficult enough just to admit that you need counseling, right? And then have to go find the services and to be told that actually there aren't confidential services on campus. You have to go looking for them in the community. Makes that process even more challenging. And so to have peers help you with at least the information gathering phase, and to be at least able to hand you a brochure to say, hey, here's the number, you call directly, I think is really helpful. And so whatever that liaison position, situation looks like, we want our Active Mind students to fill that liaison position. And then to be a referral. If there are, preferably, certainly if there's school counseling services, we want our students to be referring their peers to those counseling services. And of course, our chapters are open to all students. We go a long way to ensure that we have a chapter constitution that talks about the structure and how open our chapters have to be. So we go a long way to prohibit any barriers to membership in our chapters. So we don't allow dues of any kind unless the university or college mandates it. So again, we would never ask our student organizations, certainly our chapters, to break rules, but short of it being mandatory from the college or school. We don't allow dues. We don't allow an application for membership. We only allow they can fill out a form as a new member, so that the new folks can tell you about themselves and their interests and their strengths and whatever other information you might want to collect. But we don't allow any membership. A membership form where you have to apply to be a member. That's reserved for leadership positions and any other sort of special positions. But otherwise, as few barriers to membership as possible certainly is what we're looking for. A few things, and I think this is important especially for counseling center staff or any mental health providers you might have on a campus, is to know that our chapters are not peer support groups. They are under no circumstances ever to engage in anything that looks like peer-to-peer mental health counseling. Their mission and job is simply to refer. It might be, as a friend, to know to sit with their friend in their dorm until they can get someone to a counseling center, but it is never to, as a group, under the Active Minds name, provide counseling services. And actually, regardless of what type of training you may have available or what type of training your student members might have available, to make things really clear and to make it easy on everyone, we separate that out completely. So if a chapter, I have students sometimes say, we really feel like peer support group is missing on our campus. That is a missing resource. And I think it's great that they identify that need, but I tell them that they need to go talk to their counseling center or talk to whoever the mental health provider or health services folks are at their school and set that up, absolutely, because one of their jobs should be to figure out what's missing on campus as a resource and to try and petition it to be there for students, but that they have to set it up completely separately from the Active Minds chapter, and that it has to be under the supervision and purview of trained clinicians. And so even if, our chapter members can certainly take trainings, they can do peer-to-peer peer support group trainings and things like that, but we still don't ever allow the activity itself to be performed as a chapter activity. And then certainly Active Mind chapters are not just for students with diagnosed mental health disorders. There's the National Alliance for Mental Illness, there's NAMI chapters, and those are open to, or sort of more for the consumer and the consumer population, and they do awesome work, but what we really want is to be, again, as open to all students as possible. The whole point sort of Active Minds is to spread awareness about mental health to all students and sort of for everyone to understand that they are on the mental health spectrum, that there is no one who does not have mental health. So we want to always be as creative as possible to reach diverse populations. And with the peer-to-peer piece, this includes, actually I wanted to say earlier too, this includes specific communities of individuals on campus, right? So peer-to-peer doesn't necessarily just mean the age group, so it doesn't mean their peers as in other 18 to 24-year-olds or 18 to 22-year-olds, but peer-to-peer it may be vets, or it might be students of color, it might be international students, but the notion of peer-to-peer is your immediate peer community, that's how you really want to receive information. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. So this is probably more of the content that some of you folks might be looking for as far as the meat and potatoes of Active Minds and what we really provide you as a national organization. First and foremost, we have a whole bunch of different types of resources. Everything we have is online and accessible for free to you as soon as you become a registered student organization and a chapter of Active Minds, Inc. That includes some basic tip sheets. should back up. That includes a large number of different types of resources, but including fact sheets on disorders and how to help a friend resources and a few specific sort of content pieces to mental health and mental health disorders. But it also includes a full-fledged handbook on how to run not just a student organization successfully, but a student organization that is going to talk to a campus about mental health. And so it's not just, how do you run a fun meeting, it's how do you run a meeting where you're going to talk about mental health and have people come back to the next meeting. We walk you through leadership transition, goal setting, evaluation, working with your advisor, collaborating with other student organizations, fundraising, every aspect of running a student organization. So that's just an example of a resource we provide, but we have several others. We certainly have, as Allison was mentioning, a full-time staff here and dedicated to our chapters. My full-time is spent on chapters west, basically, of Nevada, but a large percentage of my active chapters are in the state of California. So I'm almost entirely focused on California these days. And I both work with developing chapters and then active chapters as soon as they get chartered by us at the national office. And so what I provide in my time and sort of over phone or email, Skype, any which way you prefer to communicate, our best practices. The best thing we can offer as a national office is from the chapters team perspective, from my perspective, is how this works best on other campuses. We have had so many chapters doing this work for 10 years now and making it creative and making it work and making it successful that the best thing that we provide honestly are your own best practices back to you. So we have a few different things that help you connect with each other. One of them is a program bank that is actually in the next slide. But our program bank is a searchable database of programs that have been run by chapters successfully and have been then submitted to our program bank. And so that's a really good example of idea sharing. So you can take any part or of a program that you really like or a part of a program that you really like and replicate. And certainly replicating successful best practices is probably the best you can get as far as support. We also have a host of national programs. So what Allison was talking about, the 10 folks who are devoted to chapters, are half of us are chapter managers. So our direct communication, we're in direct communication with you, our developing an active chapter, advisors, staff, and student members. But then we also have a programs team. And so what they do is develop robust programs for you to be able to run on your campuses. These include programs that are free for you to run just by virtue of being a chapter of Active Minds, Inc., and also ones that are larger scale and do require some funding. So we do have an Active Minds Speakers Bureau. They are, Allison is actually on the Bureau, and they are 13 trained, 13 or 14? I think we're at 14 now. 14. We just added someone. 14 trained they're actually younger people, I should say, who are professionally trained to speak. Everyone has a unique story. Allison talks about her brother and about founding Active Minds. Each of our speakers has struggled with a mental health issue and has successfully been treated and now can speak to the advocacy sort of component and just to what helped and how it got them through, but also now coming out at the other end. So this both hits the stigma reduction piece. So our students are seeing a young person who's really inspiring, who has struggled with an issue, come out and is in treatment or full recovery, but also to the variety sort of challenges that people face. So there's 14 completely unique stories. There are 14 unique individuals. We have a Purple Heart veteran who came back from Iraq with severe PTSD. We have just a whole slew of folks. I encourage you, if you are interested in them, to look at our Speakers Bureau page. There's short videos and blurbs about each of them, and anyone can bring in a speaker. You certainly do not have to be a chapter of Active Minds, and even if you choose to not start a chapter ever, this is programming available to you. You can always bring in an Active Minds speaker to do a presentation. We also have an Emerging Scholars Fellowship, which is a unique thing we do, actually. It isn't sort of chapter-based in any way. It is for individuals who are looking to further the mental health field, either through research or through creativity. So we have some really inspiring scholars. There's only 6 of them at a time over the span of a year fellowship who do a variety of different things. I also encourage, just so I don't take up time talking through different people's projects, for you to look at our website and to look at their projects because they are really neat. So it's anyone from, anything from doing advanced PhD research, and they sort of do this fellowship as part of their research, to really creative things like putting a martial arts program into a middle school and seeing whether that decreases depression or anxiety rates among middle school students. So that is open to anyone. You also don't have to be a member of a chapter to become a scholar, but there is a pretty rigorous selection process. So that's something you can feel free to advertise to your student bodies also. So then more to our chapter-based programming. We have National Day Without Stigma in the fall. That is a program that solely gets at the stigma surrounding mental illness and mental health. The program comes with a free kit that you can order from us and a whole bunch of different ways to use the materials you receive. Programming ideas, our chapter's table, they do Stomp Out Stigma, they do runs, they literally do stomp shows, just a whole bunch of creative ways to get people thinking about the stigma around the issue. And then the next one that happens is in February. We partner with the National Eating Disorders Association for the National Eating Disorders Awareness Week. But we have created a whole slew of our own resources that they combine online. So these are all going to be accessible online. So that targets eating disorders as an issue. And then we have National Stress Out Day in the spring. National Stress Out Day is sort of your quintessential, I think, public health program. It really gets at the fact that everyone gets stressed out. It's meant to target finals, but we are always flexible. If your final schedule doesn't fall on our National Stress Out Day, then you can always shift the programming around. But basically, stress relief is a really common it's a common thing, and it's something that everyone really needs in their lives. And so we get at the issue of stress, but then also looking at where does stress end and where does anxiety and an anxiety disorder might begin, and how you look at a little bit of the differentiating normal or healthy stress isn't really great, but healthy stress, and then what might be actually an anxiety disorder. And so our chapters, again, do a variety of super creative things for National Stress Out Day. They really like this topic. I think it's easy to program around. It does have less stigma because of stress and something common, but it also lets us reach a very, very common base. So it lets us reach anyone on campus through this program, right? So our chapters can talk to any students about stress, and no one can say, no, I've never experienced this, because I challenge anyone to find a college student that has never been stressed out in their lives. So that's National Stress Out Day. Other programs that we have that go on are Post-Secret U. For anyone who knows the Post-Secret Project, if you don't know the Post-Secret Project, I definitely encourage you to look it up at postsecret.com, I believe. I don't think it's .org, but Post-Secret is a project that was started by Frank Warren. He actually happens to live in Maryland, but basically people submit anonymous secrets to him on postcards that he collects, and then he reposts. He's published books with people's secrets, and also has a blog online where he shares secrets, and he has quite a cult following of people. And so Post-Secret U is a copyrighted program we do together with Frank Warren, where he participated in creating this program where students can run a post-secret campaign on their campuses. This gets conversations started like nothing else almost can, because it gets a little bit at the anonymity piece of sharing and of being alone and being silent and then having an outlet for those secrets. But we also created a program that's at the same time safe to run, that addresses the challenges of anonymity and sharing students' confidentiality and things like that. So for folks who know Post-Secret, it's an awesome program. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to look at it and look it up. So we have kits that we send out along with a large-scale program guide as to how to run this program. And then the biggest in-person sort of hands-on thing we do is our national conference. It's the National Mental Health on Campus Conference. Happens in November. We just finished running it in Florida 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago? No, yeah. November 9th or 11th. At the University of Central Florida. So that brings together all of our students, advisors, supporters, other mental health organizations, anyone who's interested in college student mental health. It is the only conference that at least we are aware of that focuses solely on college student mental health. It's certainly our Active Minds conference, so it's our Active Minds version of college student mental health, but it's a 3-day conference. It's a fairly cheap conference as far as professional conferences certainly go. We try to eat any costs we can so that our students can make it, so that they can get energized, they can meet others, and they get to attend 3 days of workshops, keynotes, and presentations on mental health advocacy on campus. So that's something certainly, whether you there's the link. You can look actually at the conference page. Whether you start a chapter, whether it takes you a little bit longer to start a chapter or not, that's something to look at for next year. It is an amazing way to introduce Active Minds to your students, or especially if you just started a chapter, to send them to our conference, because as you know, and I think this is less true a little bit with community colleges because we have a lot of non-traditional students. You also have a lot of commuter students. But at four-year universities, colleges like this bubble, and students get pretty stuck in their bubble and sort of forget that there's this whole other world out there of folks, and that can both be maybe a good thing, but also pretty isolating, especially if you go to school in a rural area, or there aren't any other colleges and universities around you. And so our students, it's hard sometimes for us to remind them that there's this whole huge network of Active Minds chapters, that what they're doing is only one piece, and that there's literally hundreds of student organizations that are doing the same work that they love and that they're passionate about. And so what our conference allows us to do is to bring folks together and to show them, to get them to meet each other, to network, but to show them how big our movement really is and what it really means to have 350 at any given moment separate colleges and universities involved in mental health advocacy through Active Minds. And so it's a pretty intense and awesome event. A few other things that we do certainly are provide opportunities to network with partners in the field. So this is a great opportunity for us to work with CARS and to work with other folks, but also, if there's ever a regional opportunity or even a super local opportunity to do a cool project with even just a high school down the street, or another program wants to advertise a cool resource that they have or anything like that, we're always happy to share. We always want to provide more collaboration versus less. And I just realized I forgot our, I have a sticky note right in front of me, not to forget, but our most important program, because I started talking about conference and completely forgot to mention, excuse me, our last national program, which is our Send Silence Packing program. I apologize, but Send Silence Packing is actually our single focused suicide awareness campaign. So we are not a suicide prevention program. We are definitely a mental health awareness organization, but we certainly cannot ignore suicide as an end issue. And so Send Silence Packing is our suicide awareness program that puts 1,100 backpacks, which is the number of college students roughly that die by suicide every year in the United States on campuses, on a campus for a day. And several hundred of our backpacks have stories of loved ones that people have donated to us who were lost to suicide. It is an extremely powerful program. It comes with, so the program travels on tour, and it comes with full-time staff that bring the program to your campus or to your school. It comes with 2 tables full of resources, and it comes with a whole bunch of different ideas for how to do supplemental programming around the display, but it's basically a one-day display that really puts the number and the issue in people's faces. And so what we do is we put it on out in the most trafficky part of campus, where the busiest part of the college, and then people walk through to class, and so they sort of can't ignore 1,100 backpacks on the ground. And so we always want marketing around it, but it's one of those programs you don't even really have to market very much around, because people can't ignore the display. And so Sunsound's Packing, the reason actually that it's really important to mention this program is it does only travel by tour. So we just completed a tour of southern states this fall. And next fall, the fall of 2013, it's actually coming back to California. So we had it in California in the fall of 2011. It was an amazing tour. We typically do between 10 and 14 stops or so. And because there's great demand, and because we have so many awesome chapters and supporters in California, we're going to bring it back. And so if this is something that you're interested in, again, you absolutely do not have to have a chapter of Active Minds. It certainly helps a lot, I will say, to have a chapter, because then you have a lot of the process sort of in place. You can book the space on campus. You can reach out to your to other student organizations. You can reach out to all of your departments and offices and deans of students and all those folks to get support for the display. The display costs $5,000 per stop, and so a lot of times our chapters certainly have to reach far for funding on campus to bring it to their school, but it has a lot of impact on the campus community, and we often hear our students tell us, a year later, like, people still remember the backpacks, or like people were still talking about, remember when Sunsound's Packing came to our campus. So it definitely has long-standing effect on the campus community. So it's coming back next fall. We do not have our routes set up yet, and so if you are interested, the best thing to do, we have a very basic interest form online, is to go to our website, activeminds.org, and under programming, just find Sunsound's Packing and fill out the form. Sunsound's Packing actually has its own blog too, so if you're interested in learning more, if you want to read, there's a post for every stop that we've made. You can look at all the California stops from last year, and just read more about the program. I certainly welcome you to. There's tons of pictures and everything. So the blog is just sendsilencepacking.org. So either of those places you can visit to learn more about Sunsound's Packing. And so if you're interested, just to fill out an interest form, and pretty soon our tour manager will start looking at where the interest is and, some of the stops we know we want to make, and start putting together the routes. So you need to have space on campus and funding, basically, and to let us know that you're interested, and then we can start working from there with Sunsound's Packing. So the tour, just to give you a rough idea, that Sunsound's Packing always comes back to our conference. We always have it showcased at conference, which is in November. So the tour is usually roughly September and October. It does take about 2 months for us to make all the stops, depending on certainly driving distances, but if you're looking at timing and funding and scheduling and things like that, it'll be mid-September to the end of October of next fall. So just a little bit more on some of the other things that we have going on. Connection. So I was talking about opportunities and resources from our partners in the field, but also connecting students. The other thing that we can do is connect you to each other and your students to each other. So student leaders from chapters, either in the area or outside of your area. So sometimes students like to like to hear from students in a different part of the country, because it's just a unique thing to hear from Active Minds chapter somewhere completely different. But what we do are together with our national conference in the fall, our plan regional summits in the spring. These are really grassroots events. They're great because while our national conference comes from us and we sort of guide the content and everything, for that event we have our host chapter for the regional summit do a lot of the guidance for the regional summit in the area. We've had 2 California summits already. The first ever regional summit for Active Minds Inc. was actually hosted by a California school. So again, I always feel really lucky to have the state of California in my portfolio because so many great things have been piloted and done in California. And so I'm looking absolutely to be planning a summit this spring. I just need to find funding for it. And our chapter at the Claremont colleges, the Claremont Consortium has expressed great interest. They're a teeny tiny school. They're actually a consortium of 5, but Pitzer College is where our chapter lives, and they're tiny, but they're a terrific chapter, and they're all ready to host. And so that puts them also relatively in the middle of Southern California, which is where a lot of our chapters are. So if that's something that you might be interested in, again, you absolutely don't have to have a chapter to attend. It might be a good way to learn more about Active Minds, to meet other folks who are part of chapters already. But that should be happening this spring, probably, I want to say, late March, early April. We're going to work around as many spring break schedules as possible. That is just a one-day event. It's actually about 6 to 7 hours, so it's not a time commitment the way our national conference is. So it's a little bit different. And then I mentioned our program bank, which is something also you'll be able to access as soon as you become a chapter. So just really quickly, so that there's time for questions, basic requirements of starting a chapter. It's actually a fairly easy process. We ask that you fill out a form that you're interested. That just helps me keep track of who's where and where the process is. You need an advisor who's officially affiliated with your college. You need at least 3 student leaders, one of whom has to be an underclassman, so they can't all be graduating. You have to register the group as a student organization, and then we have to fill out our chapter registration packet, which are 3 really simple things. It's proof that you're a registered student organization. It's a registration form. It's a 2-page registration form, and then it's our chapter constitution that we ask you to fill out. And then what we do with all of our chapters, even though this is a separate sort of set of special webinars, is we do have a standard new chapter webinar where we run, it's for your students first and foremost, and we run through some of the stuff actually that we've spoken to today, but just to let them know, how to find things on our website, just the very basics of getting started as a chapter. So then we ask that it's a mandatory webinar that they have to go through, and at least one student has to participate. So just to end with a few nice things that counseling centers have said about Active Minds. This is just in here to show you how well and effective how well our students work with counseling services and how effective they can be in promoting mental health. So a variety of things from direct services to just information and how peer-to-peer outreach really does work. And with that, I want to thank you so much for both listening to Allison's piece of the presentation and my piece of the presentation, but I definitely want to hear any and all questions you may have. You are always very much welcome to reach me. I also have I do have a personal Facebook account, but I have a professional Facebook account that you are welcome to use as well. It's not on here, but it's Sonia at Work, Facebook.Sonia at Work, if you wish to reach me that way. But please don't hesitate if you think of other questions later to email me or call me. But otherwise, if there are things especially that you think other folks might be interested in hearing about, we are happy to answer your questions. I'm going to go ahead.
Sonia and Allison, I don't know if you noticed or not, Betsy has posted a question.
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to say, I'm going to go ahead and answer Betsy's question. So Betsy's question is whether or not they go through gatekeeper training. We do not. We purposely don't promote a single gatekeeper training. There are some really good ones out there. There's probably about 4 or 5 of the strongest ones. We ourselves don't have a gatekeeper training that we've put together, certainly because we were really more on the advocacy education end of things, but I always encourage gatekeeper training just because really all people should should do gatekeeper training. The reason we don't really we don't mandate or anything is because they're so expensive some of the time. It's really hard to access them sometimes, and so if there's one available, we always encourage that for our chapter members. But if there isn't one available, there might not be resources to pay for one, and so we don't necessarily want that to be a caveat to doing basic sort of awareness work. And so sort of both, yes, if there is gatekeeper training, we encourage our students to do it, but we don't mandate it. And okay, so there's certainly, yes, differences that Betsy's asking about differences between four-year universities and community colleges. There are definitely some significant differences. I think the two, I would say, I'll go from what you really probably want to hear about is, are there additional challenges with community colleges? Because there's certainly not just research, but a lot of evidence that student life looks different and is a little bit more challenging at community colleges and commuter schools than at four-year universities. As of course, you all know community colleges attract non-traditional students, students who have multiple jobs sometimes, students with families, and all sorts of varying circumstances, and particularly students who take their classes and then leave at the end of the day. So you're not looking at as captive of an audience as folks who then, hang out at their dorms and don't know what to necessarily do with the rest of their evening other than studying and, then go get involved in student organizations. And so to speak to that, basically, it's just a matter of fitting the model to your population, which is sort of going to where your audience is at, so going to where your students are at. And so our community colleges, the community colleges that have chapters now have gotten really creative about this. It just usually means modifying programming. So you might not have a 3-hour panel from 6 to 9 p.m. at night with dinner served. You might have a half-hour presentation right during lunch hour, or a lot of schools I know sometimes have like a club hour or something where there's a break between classes so student organizations can function on campuses or at community colleges a little bit easier. And so it's finding sort of the timing that makes the most sense and then just modifying programming a little bit. And so varying meeting times differently, being more creative about information flow and how you get information out there, and then just modifying what type of programming you're offering. Luckily, a lot of our national programs are sort of tabling based, so you can do as little as just set up a table during a busy time between classes and reach students that way automatically, or you can have a whole, like carnival for stress out day where it goes on all day and you have slip and slides and all sorts of circus things going on. But those are, even that catches a community college student the same way that it would catch a four-year student. You just have to be a little bit more creative about fitting the timing in. Sorry, I'm reading the question. Yes, and absolutely. That's. I know you folks can also do what Betsy's typing also about cognito trainings. And there's a question about the use of cognito.
Sonia, hi, this is Betsy. I just was pointing, I was kind of back to that other question about the gatekeeper training that I was thinking for our campuses that, regarding my question about if they get any gatekeeper training, I'm just thinking for the campuses that are listening, if that was an issue, it shouldn't be a cost because they could direct the students to the cognito training that we have available for free in terms of right now. So I kind of followed up on a late part about my first question on gatekeeper training.
That's fantastic. So cognito is a resource that is available to folks?
Yes, we have that available for all our campuses right now through our grant, that they have the faculty and staff training, and there's also a student component and a veterans component. And so I was just trying to point out to the campuses that are listening in on Active Minds, if you're interested in implementing the chapters or doing that, that is a resource available to you for your students in terms of getting some training. sorry. I'm going to be quiet so the campuses can ask questions.
No, that's really helpful, though.
That's helpful, yeah.
And I think to answer, this is Allison, to answer the question that I see from Scott Rose, we certainly have had chapters that have used different trainings. So I don't know if that question was oriented towards us or to Betsy, but Cognito has definitely been a training that some of our chapters have participated in the past. I can't necessarily speak to in terms of the level of success. As Sonia said, there are a number of ones that are good and that different people find helpful, and certainly those that require are cheaper are sometimes more accessible, and in many ways some training is better than none. So I can't speak to specifics, but we certainly are familiar with Cognito, and a number of our chapters have used that one.
Yeah, hi, Allison. This is Scott. Thank you. And my question is kind of more global in just using technology, a web-based platform like this, contact strategy, if that's been successful in addressing or reducing stigma.
It's a great question, and it may actually go beyond a little bit of what we know. Certainly, the research shows that you want to get people where they are. However, there are differing opinions about the value of technology versus in person, and especially if somebody is struggling, you want them to get off their computer and get in front of people. And at the same time, if they won't get in front of somebody, maybe it's better to have them over technology at all. So I don't necessarily know the extent to what the research is showing. I do know the reason that Cognito exists and other programs like that exist is because this idea that students are online, and so we need to, as Sonia was saying earlier, the premise behind Active Minds and how you can be creative and be the most successful is to get the students where they are. And so certainly kind of virtual and online trainings are one way to accomplish it. I don't know much about the comparing them with some of the other trainings.
And this is Betsy, and it's just not to get off on the Cognito thing. For our system, it was very useful because of the time issues for faculty and staff, and the fact that there's many part-time faculty and staff. So we were trying to be responsive to our system with respect to the needs that we heard when we were looking at different models, as well as we are offering and are participating in other types of gatekeeper training, not just that one. We are just sending, in fact, a bunch of folks to the mental health first aid and assist trainings in partnership with CSU, just because we had people who have various interests and needs in terms of this type of information. So we were trying to provide multiple opportunities for people to receive different types of gatekeeper training.
Absolutely. That's great. Any other questions that we can answer? I don't want to let this linger too long necessarily. I guess I'll advance it to the final slide just to say as we end the webinar today, and obviously we have plenty more time for questions, but as we do end the webinar, there will be an evaluation that pops up, and we ask that everybody take some time to complete that evaluation, and that will pop up on your screen as soon as we end the webinar. Sonia put her contact information on the slideshow, and you can access all of us at www.activeminds.org. That's our website. My email address, this is Allison, is just allison@activeminds.org, so you can always feel free to either contact either one of us with any sort of follow-up. But I encourage you as well to spend some time on our website. All the most updated information about Active Minds is always on our website, as well as on our Facebook page. So if you are on Facebook, I encourage you to like us and to fan us on Facebook and on Twitter. We have a robust social media following and campaign that we undergo each week.
And Allison, this is hi everyone. This is Barbara Thorson from CARS, and Sonia, thank you so much. And CARS is the Training and Technical Assistance a project for the California Student Mental Health Program. And if you are wanting some assistance in setting up an Active Minds chapter, or just want information that we can connect you with Allison, we can work with you on, as part of the grant, supporting that effort. So CARS is happy to assist Allison and Sonia with the community colleges who would be interested.
That's great. And we really are looking forward to working with you guys. I think this is just, there's so much potential. And as Sonia said, with California having the most chapters to begin with, and so many of our chapters in California and in community colleges already, there's so much potential. There's so much opportunity to connect chapters with each other and to really be able to learn from each other and really work with us as a national office. Because there's such a high concentration of chapters in the state, there's so much more we can continue to do as a national office to help support those chapters and help everybody recognize that what's happening on campus is a piece of the puzzle of what we're really promoting on a national level, and with our national accolades and media attention and whatnot, elevating this issue to get the attention that it needs and deserves, and how each of our chapters is a big part of that puzzle that we put together.
And this is Betsy again. I just would encourage the campuses that are on the call that have the campus-based grants. It would be great. We had some great information today from Sonia and Allison about them planning the Send Silence packing tour, and I know Brian participated in that last year. And it'd be great for those of you who have campus-based grants to maybe think about if you are looking at an Active Minds chapter and looking at participating in that, maybe look at your funding and see if that's something you'd be interested in doing, because it's really a good planning horizon for next year to think about that, because that would be really great to be able to have a good presence again in California with our grant.
Absolutely.
I should say, if you're looking for sort of a launch event, there's no better way. It's so it's such an intense event, and people literally can't miss participating just by walking through that. It usually gets a ton of signatures from people interested in starting a chapter. So, if you really wanted to put all your bang for your buck into a marketing, even just looking at it from a marketing perspective and getting a chapter off the ground, we usually get 30 to 100. We usually get 30 to 100 or more signatures of students who walk by, who stop, who are interested in what it is, and then realize it's about mental health, it's suicide prevention, mental health advocacy, and get really excited to sign up to start this new student organization, or to join this new student organization if it's already on campus. So it's certainly a terrific. It's absolutely first and foremost a suicide awareness program, but can also really, really buff up a chapter and getting a chapter going.
That's great. Well, thank you both, Allison and Sonia, very, very much. We were so happy to have you do the webinar for the grantees, and we really look forward to continued partnership with Active Minds. Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting us on.
It was a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. So, Joanna, if you want to we'll just go ahead and do the evaluation once we log off, and we do appreciate you taking a few minutes to do that. It does help us in our planning as we go forward with working with the grantees. So thank you all very much. And once again, Sonia and Allison, thank you very much. And Joanne, thanks for your help as well.
Take care, everybody.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.